entrepreneurs. Get ready to stop dreaming and start doing. Here, ideas become action. We prioritize purpose and profit. You ready? Let's go. Okay, welcome Yessy Downs to the Purpose and Profit Club podcast. I'm really excited you're here, and I actually want to tell you one thing, which is I was looking at your headshots that you sent me, and I was just like ear to ear smiling. No one has headshots like these, by the way. They're like colorful and warm and joyous and badass. And first, we just have to talk about those. They're amazing. Who did them? I'm like, where are you in these? I want to go to this land. So
actually, so this shoot where those pictures are from was, so I work exclusively with Vibe House, my friend Natalie, who is a videographer, and then Sarah, who is a photographer. I mean, I trust them so much. They photographed not just my business, they did my wedding. My whole life, they have photographed. So I trust them with everything. But this particular shoot was me being honestly just out of my mind. I was like, okay, they're like, what do you want to do? And I was like, here's my thought. I want to do monochromatic. Basically, the theme was,
that's what I was like, monochromatic colors. Oh, yeah. I was so into it. Yeah. Okay. Tell me.
But I was like, I want women of color taking up space inside and outside. So the monochromatic was that unity that Oxford comma brings, right? So all of us in the same color. But if you look, everyone is styled differently. I wanted everyone to bring their own thing, because while people of color are together, we are also very different and show up differently. So I wanted to bring that. And then it's all of us taking up space in interior spaces and exterior spaces. And obviously the colors are the Oxford comma colors. But when I said to these two people, hi, I want to do monochromatic shoots with monochromatic settings that are green, pink, cream, and orange, they were like, we're going to have to travel to 52 different places to get all
like,
that.
What do you do? Yeah.
Yeah. So they went back and they said, okay, how can we make this happen? We had like 14 models, models. These are my friends. These are people who I either partner with and work with, or who are like my real life best friends, were in my wedding, right? So those are my models, because I wanted it to be real people.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then they came back to me and they were like, we did it. We found a place. They found a beautiful Airbnb where we took all the interior shots. And then it was in Oregon. It was in Eugene, Oregon, where we were able to find the orange rocks, and then kind of like that pink landscape, and then the beautiful white rocks and the greenery. Honestly, the greenery was the backyard of the Airbnb that we were in. So it was amazing. And honestly, like, we shot over 4 days. We all stayed at the Airbnb where we shot. And it was the best experience. All of us left, and we all were like, it felt more like a retreat than work.
I
so
bet.
I think you can really see that in the pictures. We all had such a good time. But thank you. I love them so much. And it was such a good experience.
And I love that you just said taking up space. So that is something that's really, really important to me. That's something that I've been working with a lot of founders on, is this idea, especially women. We're kind of brought up to like not take up space, to literally be smaller, right? And to let the man speak and things like that. And I was joking, and I'm teaching this class. I'm like, does everybody here know what manspreading is? And we're all like, yes, we know what manspreading is. And it's like, literally, in order to sell and pitch yourself to fundraise or whatever it is, put yourself out there. Like, you want your shoulders back. You want to take up space. And I feel like your photo shoot, you're taking up space. You did it. So I'll have to link to that in the notes on the blog. I'll put a couple of your photos on there so people can see. But I started in the middle. First, let you introduce yourself. Tell us all about Oxford Comma Collective and what you do.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Yessy. It's actually short for Yesenia. I'm a Latina copywriter. I've been in the advertising industry for now almost 10 years. I've worked on some really huge brands. And what I found while I was working within the advertising industry were a couple things. One, whenever you were writing for other companies, it felt like I had to write in this very white box, and I hated that. And then the other thing was that all this knowledge was not accessible to small businesses, the people who really needed it. Like, people, I know our big clients were paying millions of dollars for our work, but I had all this knowledge, and I was like, why not give it to people? So I created Oxford Comma Collective. We're a collective of BIPOC queer writers, and we help businesses come up with the most authentic, most liberated version of their brand voice. And then we help them implement that across all different channels. The reason why Oxford Comma is so important to me is because I strongly believe that any writer can write. If there are there are many good copywriters out in the world. But if I'm being honest, there's something magical that happens with someone who understands you on a cultural level, on a personal level, writes for you. There's good copywriting, and then there is copywriting that really gets you. So when I started Oxford Comma, from the first day, I knew that it couldn't just be me, because if I want to go out and say, we're going to write the most authentic copy for you, listen, I can write anything. I've written from Boeing to Dunkin, right? Like I'm flexible. But do I know every single person's experiences? No. So I wanted to create a collective so that I partner people with writers who understand them a little better than maybe I could, in order to create those communications that really feel true to you. That's why I think we've been so successful, because I'm not just like, hi, I'm one copywriter and I'm going to write for you because I know what's best for you. It's, hi, we're a collective of writers, and I kind of play matchmaker. And I put people together based on shared experiences, shared beliefs, shared passions. And that really creates such a beautiful creating environment. And I think it's the reason why Oxford Comma has been so successful, but it's what I love most. So that is my long version of
I
what
love
Oxford
it,
Comma.
but I feel like I was picturing like the process of onboarding a client. So I used to run an agency. That discovery process, there's like a learning curve, right? Because you're trying to get to know, if the client a lot of times doesn't know who they are yet either, if they're new-ish. And if you're pairing them up with somebody who already gets it, it's so much faster. So I really love the way that it's really smart the way that you're saying, like, I can actually, it's almost like matchmaking. I can matchmake you with the right person because they share an experience. There is some overlap. And so their learning curve is going to be a lot shorter. They're going to get it right away, right? There's going to be less rounds of edits and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the best part about it. I mean, it's happened to me all the time where I hop on a call and I'm like, you are so good at your job. You could never work for me. You could never do this for me because you don't get me. It doesn't matter how good you are at a skill. I have a particular POV and a particular way that I show up. And it's so difficult for someone who doesn't understand that to create for you. So that's why it's so important. And it's funny that you said matchmaking, because every single time I'm on a discovery call, we call them meet and greets. But whenever someone comes to meet with us, I'm like, just so you know, as we're talking, I'm playing matchmaker in my head, running through my roster of writers, deciding who the best person to work with you is. Because that's basically what it is. Like, I'm here, but I'm really just like going through it and saying, okay, ooh, that's something that this writer knows and loves, or like thing they said, or ooh, that experience they had. I know one of my writers has it. So it's really important.
That's so smart. Okay, you have to tell us this is a recent post, and I know you've talked about it before, but I saw it on Instagram recently. I'm like, you gotta give us the overview of brand voice versus tone versus messaging. Because listen, in my world, they lump it all together, right? And just tell us all the things. Why is it important? So, what's the difference?
Totally. So I think I'll start with what the difference is. And I think, to your point, in the industry, a lot of words get mixed up, like brand mission and vision versus purpose and promise. Like those things get mixed up. Right? There's a lot of terminology and it's super fucking confusing. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but I will.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it's really, really, really confusing. And I think a big reason for that is I've done it. If you go on Google and you type in brand voice, you click on one and it tells you it's this, but then you click on another one, it tells you it's something else. Some people use it interchangeably. And I think, honestly, the onus is on us copywriters to teach people the difference. And it's a big part of what we do is like education, because copywriting as a whole is super misunderstood and people are not that educated on it. But when you talk about brand voice, so you have your brand's messaging, that is what you're saying, right? That is the brand's story. It is the things that fall under your brand's messaging, how you're talking, what you're saying, all those things fall under brand messaging. So when you think about your elevator pitch, that's brand messaging. When you think about your brand position, that is brand messaging. When you talk about keywords, brand manifesto, all of that is messaging. So the brand messaging is what you're saying, right?
Yep.
Brand tone is how you say it. How does your brand communicate? What is it that your brand, when someone speaks to your brand, how does your brand speak back? When your brand is educating people, how does it educate? When your brand is listening, how does it listen? So all those things, it's the how, right? And then brand voice is everything. Brand voice takes strategy. So it takes understanding who your audience is. It takes understanding who your competitors are. And then it says, okay, based on all that, I'm going to create messaging and a tone that is aligned with that. And then I'm going to go out into the world. So it's really the soul of your brand. It's all those things lumped together.
And I see so many organizations go from name of organization business, logo, skip this, and then go, hey, it's really hard to find clients, customers, donors, make sales, get donations, whatever that is they're doing, right? And then you look at their messaging, their words, and it's very generic, it's very watered down, and their tone, so it's just kind of like in the middle, right? Is that what happens when you don't have one?
Yeah. So I think that's actually the biggest issue. And I think if you look at anything I post, it's probably the thing I'm always trying to combat. It's the skipping of this step. It's so important. Strategy, brand voice. Before you have a single logo, before you have a single image, before you pick a single color, you need to understand who your brand is. I think about it like this. When you're a teenager and you're like trying to figure out how you dress, what your style is, it's shit because you don't know who you are yet. So you're just kind of adapting to what other people are doing. But as you grow and you understand better who you are, then you're like, no, this is my style. Yes. This is how I dress. That's exactly what it's like with your brand voice. When you first start out and you're like, I don't really know who my brand is. I don't know who I want my brand to be. You're really just mirroring all the other shit you're seeing. And there's no truth to your brand. Your brand is kind of, instead of parts of you, your brand is parts of everything else. It's mirroring the world versus mirroring you and your audience, right? All of a sudden, if you understand your brand voice, if you clearly say, these are our values, this is our vision for the world, this is our mission and what we do every single day, this is our purpose, this is what we're grounded in. Now you could say, okay, if this is all the truths about me, this is how I should look, this is how I should show up in the world, perpetuate that. But so many people just skip that. And then afterward, they're trying to create it. It's the weirdest thing. Yeah.
So two things. Number one, it's not too late. So if that's you listening, it's not too late. You can go through this process now. And two, when you go through this process, it makes writing or pitching or talking to a prospect so much easier. Your analogy of like what it's like to be a teenager. So I literally had a moment where I was like, oh, 7th grade Christina, she thought she was going to wear like hippie clothes for a minute. That wasn't it. And then you like walk by the Gap and you're like, I guess I'll wear the thing in the mannequin. I guess that wasn't it. And then you're like, oh, I got it. Grunge, vintage. That's what I want. But it's like, until you figure out your style, you're just mimicking, right? And then once you find your style, you're like, it's so much easier to shop, right? It's so much easier to like figure out you. And same thing for this process is when you have these core messages outlined, not tone, it's so much easier to respond. It's so much easier to send an email, to write a fundraising appeal. Yeah. Tell us.
I talk about this all the time when people are like, oh, I'm sitting in front of a blank page, or they're like, oh, how do I get an email? I get anxiety. Or even like, oh, this person wrote to me on social media and I don't know how to respond. And I'm like, that's because you don't know your brand voice. Because once you understand what your values are, how you show up, your tone, and you have all of that, your messaging, you have it all, it's so easy to just be like, I know exactly how I respond to this. I know exactly what the answer should be here because most of it is already written for you in your brand voice guidelines for you. All you have to do is pull from it and it'll answer itself. And I think that's the clarity that so many of our clients get. It's like before this, and that's honestly, if I'm being completely honest, that's probably the biggest piece of feedback that we get. It's like, it's so much easier to write now. I also always tell people, like when they come work with me, I have a rule that if you don't have a brand voice, I do not work with you, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I don't have to build it for you. That's not my
Yeah.
issue. But if you don't have it, I won't work for you, because that's like going to a designer and being like, hey, design my website. I have no branding. What
Yeah.
am I supposed to do?
Right.
So whenever people don't have a brand voice, I won't work with them. That's a very big rule of mine, because then we're stuck trying to build a brand voice as we're writing. You're building the plan as you're finding it.
Yep.
And that's a huge issue. So it's a huge rule of mine. And then when we do get to build people's brand voices, we always tell them, hey, look, we do not have to be the ones to write your copy. In fact, if people come to me for web copy and don't have a brand voice, I'll tell them, do brand voice with us. And then if it's because of the investment, the whole point of the brand voice guide is that we don't own your brand voice. You can go out into the world and get anyone who's a competent writer will be able to write it for you, or even you yourself.
Yeah.
So we always tell people that. In fact, I've downsold myself so many times by being like, hey, don't worry about your web copy. Let us do your brand voice. And then go give it to someone else. Go let someone else do it. Like I'm not a gatekeeper. I always tell people, price should never be the reason you don't get the things you need for your business. But at the very least, I want to equip you with all the things you need to then go hire someone who maybe isn't going to cost you as much money, which is totally fine. But like, let us give you the tools that you need.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time.
What would you say so whenever I talk to my clients about writing anything, telling a story, writing any sort of messaging, any sort of copy, a lot of times that perfectionism piece comes up. And even I was on a coaching call this morning and my client was like, essentially, can you just write it for me? Can you just write me this follow-up email? And what was underneath that was, I just don't know what to say because I don't have the right things to say, as if there's a right thing to say. So he really understood. And what I said to him was, all right, just pitch me, just tell me. So I was like, I'm not doing it for you. You're going to pitch me. This is your business. But that perfectionist brain, because I mean, you're an amazing writer. And so I would be like, you write my copy, you do it. Yessy. So what do you say to somebody who you're trying to empower to quit the perfectionism and get it done?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that I would say is that perfectionism is bullshit. Like it's not really perfectionism, right? What you're mirroring is some message or something that you've seen out in the world. And also a lot of it comes from the fact that we were all trained. Yeah. All of us, every single one of us went to school and was trained to write a certain way. So when we're not writing that way, we're like, oh, it's not right. Oh, it's not the right thing to say. Yeah. Right. So I think what it really means, what I would say to people is, discover what your tone is, at least understand, like, are you warm? Are you direct? Figure out those words, always have them in your back pocket. And then just fucking write it the way you would say it. The best thing you can do is talk like a fucking human. Like most people get so caught up on like commas. They
formalize the shit out of it. Yes. Yeah.
And then that honestly destroys your tone. Just say it. Every time I do a lot of consultations to people and I'm like, this sentence, say it the way you would say it to me as if you were talking to me. And then I'm like, cool, now let's write that, because that's what people want to read, right? And then you just check that back versus your tone, the tone words, the 8 to 10 words that you decided are your tone words, and say, okay, cool. I'm like, I wrote this sentence, but my tone is a little warmer. So maybe I won't say this word. Or I wrote this sentence, but my tone is direct. So I'm going to remove the I thinks, right? But that's it.
Oh my gosh. That's like all the women, I feel like, I mean, I've been undoing this for years. Less exclamation points, Christina, less I think, less extra words, right? Because we've been kind of permissioning ourselves in these emails, right? So it's like, oh yeah, that's not me. Pull that out, pull that out, pull that out.
I think kind of all those things. And it's like, and honestly, if you want to throw exclamation points in, I actually don't agree with that one. Throw in as many exclamation points as you want. You know why? That's how you speak. If I'm excited about something, I'm going to throw the exclamation point. What it is if I'm throwing in an exclamation point too soft in it, right. But that's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter. Just say it out loud and say, okay, yeah, if I was talking to someone, that's how I would say it. Great. Yeah. So that's really the only test that needs to pass. It doesn't need to be this or that. Just if I'm going to respond to this person. And I think it gets more difficult when it's like a sticky situation that you're like, I feel like I got to be really careful with my words. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Sometimes you just have to respond. The worst thing you could do is to not respond and hold on to it. Just say it the way you would say it. If people accept that in a way that is not great, that's not really your problem. I think we make ourselves so responsible for people's reaction to our actions that it makes us overthink things, but we are not fully responsible for the way that people respond to the way that we act or the way that we
Yes.
talk, right? And I think that's something we have to unlearn because we've been taught, and that's like in general, this isn't even about responding anymore. This is getting really meta, but it's really about the fact that so many of us, it's the reason why we're small. It's the reason why we say, I think. It's the reason why we do so many things is because we are taught that we have to be polite, that we have to be kind, that we have to do all these things, that we have to have grace. And then you realize that the reason you're taught that is because they're teaching you to be responsible for someone else's response to your actions, but that's not really what it is. It's, as long as you're not a dick,
Yeah.
you know, obviously don't be rude, don't be a lot of things, but if you're just yourself and you're responding to someone the way that you would as a human, and that's your natural reaction, I don't think that you should be responsible for how someone else interprets that.
100%. Yeah. And that takes, in the beginning, it takes some courage to do, but it's worth doing. It's worth doing. And it will also get you faster to where you want to be in your own personal growth and goals. So yeah, for sure. I want to switch gears for a second and talk a bit about the community. You have created a pretty awesome community. I hang out with you, I feel like, on Instagram, but I'm like, maybe you got a community on Twitter. I don't know, LinkedIn, but talk to me about the power of community, why that's important to you. Let's talk about community.
Yeah, it's actually really funny because if I'm being honest, I consider myself to be pretty introverted. It's hard to be, it's hard to be me. No, it's hard to be the way that I am because I'm really good at being social, but I'm actually an introvert. I'm really drained being around people along. So the building a community for me was always important. Also really difficult because I don't really put myself out there, and I talk about this a lot, but I'm not like out there trying to make friends. But I was very lucky that when I came into this space, I just met people who were the fucking best. Like, I'm friends now with so many people that I met in this space. And it's so important to uplift those people and that they uplift you. The part about community that for me is so important is entrepreneurship is lonely as shit. It's the loneliest job for a long time until you can build out a team.
And no one gets it.
Yeah.
No one your friends don't get it. My neighbor doesn't get it. No one gets it unless they're doing it
your
too.
family, no one gets it. So it's so important to surround yourself with people who are doing the same things as you. You don't know how many things I have learned by just like talking to one of my, entrepreneur friends and like being like, oh, I have this problem. And they're like, oh, this is a solution I have, or, just like, I've learned so much just from that. Like I have weekly co-works with some of my friends, and it's just, to me, the thing that keeps my head on straight, if I'm being honest. Like there have been a lot of times where I'm like, just burn it all down, forget it. I don't want to do this anymore. And then I'm able to pivot and talk to my friends and say, this is what I'm feeling. And they're like, wait, no, step back. Yeah. And a lot of people don't get that. A lot of people don't have that. So that's, I think, a big reason why a lot of people have imposter syndrome. It's a big reason why a lot of people don't grow their business. It's people get just so overwhelmed. But if you have a community, you're able to have other people who understand you and who check you and who, it's like kind of like having coworkers, and you need that kind of community to help you build your own business. Like building a business alone is hard as fuck. Like I can't stress that enough. It's so hard, and being able to be surrounded by people who understand you, who get you, who can push you up. I mean, again, that's what my whole business is about, right? Surrounding yourself with people who get you. And I've been very lucky with my community, Latinx marketing, Mari, my friend, Monforte Studio, China, just one of the greatest humans on the planet, Kathy Baptista, who is my real life best friend. We've been best friends forever, but we now run businesses that work well together. Everyone at Vibe House, Natalie, Sarah, Gigi, obsessed with them. And it's just so nice. Gratiana from the Refined brand, Reina from Ghetto. Like, I've just been so lucky to have all these people. They were all at my shoot. We're all in each other's shoots. So we're supporting each other. We're helping each other find ways to make our businesses better. I'm partners with a lot of these people where we're co-creating now and have like morphed our services into one to make it an easy experience, because we all agree about the way that, you do your brand voice, then you do your branding, then you do your web copy, then you do your website. So we work together in that way, and it's so symbiotic. It's beautiful. So yeah, all that to say that community for me, I think, is the thing that has kept us in business for so long.
I mean, and it's kind of interesting, like organically where the referrals come from is through those, but like the need to end the silos because it's so easy as an entrepreneur to get in your own head. I mean, I get it. And just a voice memo to somebody else who gets it can be the difference. I was doing a LinkedIn Live for the first time like last month, and I was like, Carrie, I can voice memo Carrie, who is in Minnesota, and she'll tell me how to do it. I don't know how to do it. She told me what software, she told me stuff I didn't know. And it was like, thank you, Carrie, and those relationships with other online business owners, other creatives are so, so important. And even if it's like event, or even if it's, and I don't know what to do here, or all of it. Yeah.
Or like, sometimes I'm just venting and like, I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so stressed about this system or whatever. And honestly, I've had a moment where I was like, oh, my systems, I want to do this and that. And China was like, have you thought about Zapier? And I was like, I've never heard of Zapier. This was like years ago, but still, she was like, I've never heard of it. It changed my entire business, right? Or just this weekend, we were having a conversation where China's like, I'm feeling this and this. And I was like, ooh, try this. And she's like, ooh, I love that. So it's so important to just to be able to have those conversations with someone who understands it. Because if I was telling my husband like, oh, my systems, he would have been like, don't worry, you'll get it. Or, so because he doesn't know anything.
Mine's like, how's your funnel?
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's good. The one time, so I have 2 kids, and the one time I told my son something like, oh, I'm going to be a little late, and I'm recording a podcast, and his eyes got huge. He was like, you're going to be on a podcast? And I was like, how do you know what a podcast is? He's 7. And I was like, yeah. And it was like the only time that it has clicked at all, this online business thing. He was like, I know what it is. I've seen it. I guess he saw it on his iPad before. And so it was very cute. I was like, yes.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about help triage a problem, help solve a problem. So what would you say to somebody? So I have a lot of organizations that I work with, particularly this would be a nonprofit question, but where they're like, I wish that we could reach out and cultivate a younger audience. This is a big one. They're like, how do we get those Instagrammers, or just really anyone younger in our world to notice and care and get involved with, and of course, donate to our organization? And what would you say to that? What would you, just cultivating a younger, newer audience?
Yeah. So I think understanding that audience is the best thing that you could do. I think a lot of us want to appeal to people, but then we don't take the time to understand them. It's the same thing with like when you're arguing with someone and you're like, they are not listening to me. And it's like, well, because you're not taking the time to understand.
That's me.
Their needs. Yeah. You're not
just plowing through my point.
Correct. You're not trying to get them to understand or your point, or you don't really know how they listen, how they accept information, how they engage with things. And I think that's the biggest disservice we do, is that we skip right to the creation and forget to do the research. So much of what we do with brand voice is research. I joke with everyone that I work with that we cyber stalk you and then we cyber stalk your audience, but I mean it. When we create audiences for people, we are doing research. We are meeting these people where they are. We are looking at what they're posting on social media, what social media they're on. I mean, we're doing deep dives. We're seeing what brands are they following. We're seeing what kind of memes are they liking? What kind of people are they engaging with? Are they commenting? Are they not commenting? We really look into that. And I think that that's the most important thing that you need to do. Is you can't just be like, I want a younger audience and keep doing what you're doing. If you want a younger audience, you need to understand. And I want to be clear here, because I think a lot of people interpret this and they're like, oh, that must mean I have to get on TikTok. No, you don't. It's not really the answer. Social media platform is not the answer. It's about, what do they need to hear? What are the words that you need to say to them? What do they care about? That you can offer them, and that benefit that you can provide for them. I think that's a big step that people miss. They're just like, this is who I want to talk to. And it's like, okay, cool. Bridge the gap between what you do and what they care about. And I promise you'll start to see them come to you. But some people don't do that. They're just like, well, what I do is X, Y, Z. I also think the thing that's important is this whole, like, I want to talk to everyone. I want to talk to everyone. I want to talk to everyone. No, you really don't. I think it just, some people are scared. And I hate the term niching down, because really that's not what I'm ever telling anyone to do. But what I'm saying is, you gotta pick some lanes. You know what I'm saying? You gotta, and I think people are like, oh, but I talk to an older audience and a younger audience. Okay. What are the psychographics that unite those two audiences? Where are the parallels so that you have a message that speaks to both of them? Because even though you have older people and younger people, there has to be overlap. What's the Venn diagram? What's the middle part of that Venn diagram?
Yeah.
You have a message that connects with both of them. And then you can find ways to like if you're segmenting, you're saying, okay, this message is just for the younger audience, and this message is just for a slightly older audience. And make sure that there's stuff in there that might resonate with both of them, right? There has to be some overlap. What happens is that people are like, I'm talking to young people who care about this, and then I'm talking to older people who don't care about that, and then I'm talking to people in this area that are completely different. And then you're like, okay, there's no overlap. Like, how are you talking to all those people? And why? Are you really fit to talk to them? So I think that's the biggest thing that I would say is like, know your audience. Actually take the time, talk to teenagers, talk to young people.
I love that.
Like, it's such a missed thing to do voice of audience, like voice of customer research, and just like reach out and say, hey, if I send you a Starbucks gift card, can I borrow 5 minutes of your time to just ask questions? Or if you have kids who have friends, like have a conversation with those kids. Like, I think that's so important. Like, I have a nephew who's 16 and I'm always like, what's this? What's going on? Have you
same? What are you looking at?
yeah. And I follow his Instagram, and then if he like tags a weird thing, I'm like, ooh, what's that? But you have to do it. Or like, especially with TikTok, I think the algorithm is so good. It's so good at keeping you in your interests that I like to go out and be like, ooh, who's this person following? And then kind of watch videos that maybe I wouldn't, but it helps me expand my aperture. So I think it's important to really do that.
So you touched on this piece in your response, and I was like, ooh, I want your input on this, is how do we nudge people to really step into their own thought leadership? Like, what it is they stand for, what it is they don't really stand for, where they have a strong voice or opinion. And it's kind of like drawing the line in the sand. It might sound like I'm saying a political issue, and maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. But just that, like, this is what I stand for. This is what I'm about. How do we nudge people to step into their thought leadership?
Yeah, I think this answer has a couple responses. I think the first one is like, when you build your brand voice, you understand what your values are, what your non-negotiables are. And I think it's super important to know those. I think understanding what's a non-negotiable for you before you start doing and making business decisions is really important. A lot of the times we operate from a survival standpoint where we're just like, I just need my business to survive. We make decisions that go against who we are, who that feel kind of gross, but we're like, I have to do it. I have to do it. I have to do it. And I completely understand that. But I think understanding what is non-negotiable for me. What is a boundary, a line that I'm saying no to? You don't have to say it out loud, but you need to know them. And I think that's the part where we fail, is that we don't even start there. Understand that running a business is like being in a relationship with the world. And in every relationship, you need to draw those boundaries. You need to know what your non-negotiables are. Business is not any different. So I think that's the very first thing, is really understanding what you can and can't do. I think the other thing is get rid of the fear that you're going to piss someone off. Have you seen, it doesn't matter how good, how kind, how anything someone is, there's always going to be one person that's like, fuck you, I hate you. Okay, cool. I think that fear for so many of us is like, someone's not going to like me. Someone's going to take this the wrong way. Listen, there's no perfect thing that you're going to say that every single person in the world is going to be like, love it, got it, beautiful, checked off. No. So I think that you need to understand, it's not so much as like, I'm going to piss people off. It's like, there are things that, again, those non-negotiables, that if someone is mad about it, good for me. That tells me
you're in the arena now. You're having a conversation. I mean, correct. I remember one of the first pieces of criticism I got, I was like, oh, okay, here it is, or the replies, okay, I'm ruffling some feathers. I'm on the right track here. I'm saying things that not everybody else is saying in our industry. That's okay. And it feels uncomfortable, but that's okay. And rinse and repeat. Here we go. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. I think so many of us are so hesitant to be uncomfortable. We're so hesitant to have a mirror held up to us that it keeps us kind of playing small, playing complacent, doing the things we want. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's also okay to be polarizing and say a thing that maybe not everyone's going to agree with, if it's what you believe. I think the other part of this is that there are people who are like intentionally polarizing, problematic, for clout.
Yeah. This is not that.
I hate that. But if you if I truly believe something, I am going to say it. And it's a part of my business. I think the biggest disservice you can do to yourself is to build a business based on values that are just like appeasing people, because the same reason you left your corporate job and you stopped working where you were working or whatever will make you leave your own business. Because if you were working you've worked at a place where you were just so misaligned with the way it was run, with the values that they had, that you were like, I hate it here, I gotta go. Imagine saying, okay, I'm gonna leave and work for myself and do whatever I want. And then you end up building a business just like the one you left. That's not freedom. That's not good. You're just back in the same cycle.
That so many entrepreneurs do that, including myself. I did that for a while where I was like, oh my God, I built my own business that just replicates a corporate job. Like, I don't have to work 9 to 5. I don't have to sit in front of a computer all day, and once I really realized that, it got a lot more fun. So,
Yeah, I talk about that, the 9 to 5 thing all the time, because we are a team of contractors and we don't always work 9 to 5, right? Like our hours, sometimes we will have a weekend meeting, sometimes we will have an early or a late meeting. And when people are like, well, I only work 9 to 5, it's always like, did you leave your business to just be in another business that is not geared around you? I'm like, especially when I work with other creatives and I'm like, you can box your creativity into 8 hours of the day. Like, that's wild to me. Sometimes I wake up at 1 a.m. and I'm like, oh my God. And I'll write it down. But like, I don't, especially for creative people, but honestly, I think we're all creative people. Even if you're a systems person, like, you know how creative you have to be to visualize a system for people or to it's all like, or how creative you have to be to like money manage to a point where you're profitable. Like that's, I mean,
I'm constantly, teaching my clients. I'm like, go for a walk. On the other side of that walk, you're going to have figured it out. Go for a drive during your workday. Go for a drive. You will have figured out the solution of what to write or what to say or what to do next or what system you need. Like, there is something magical, or it's why people get ideas in the shower, right? It's that same thing of like, they need to be away from it and boom, it comes into focus.
Yeah. But there's all this pressure to fit everything. Fit all your brilliance into 8 hours. And if I don't get it, and then you start getting to this point where you start being hard on yourself and you're like, am I not good at my job because I'm not being productive or proactive or whatever? And it's like, no, maybe you're just like working in these moments that aren't the best for you and your mind and your mindset.
100%. Yes. That's probably my favorite takeaway of this whole episode. That is gold. Yes. I want to ask you, let's see, 2 more questions. One is, do you think that brands or entrepreneurs should share their like mistakes, their misses, their curveballs? And I'll give you like a practical example. I'll give you 2. One would be, if I have a launch that doesn't go how I hoped it would go, should I share that with my email subscribers? Or 2, if an organization has a fundraiser and they don't meet their goal, should they share that? Or should they just, what do you think?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this. So I'll explain to you why.
Okay.
I have a very interesting relationship with the term small business. And I really am like, I don't identify as a small business. I identify as a business. I hope that my clients don't identify as small businesses, that they identify as businesses, because I think that calling yourself a small business creates a really limiting belief in your brain that causes you to do things. And I always think about it. Like, one of the examples is when people are like, I'm raising my prices. Does Target tell you when they're raising their prices? Target doesn't give a shit. Target just raises their prices and then you show up. Like, and I think some people do it like as a marketing tactic where they're like, it's the last chance for you to get it at this price.
Sure.
Then people are like, if you're still letting people buy it for this price right now, then why are you changing it? Right. And then they feel like they have to explain and over explain and all this stuff. And I think it's because we're
apologizing.
Yes. And we have to be transparent in order to be good. And it's like, I think sometimes you just raise your prices, and like, you don't have to explain to everyone why inflation and the cost of living and the fact that you're a bad bitch who can do this at this price point. Like, why do you have to explain that to people? Just raise your prices. So to the point of like explaining your mistakes, right? When you take that mentality to explaining your mistakes, I think that, again, we're taught so much to explain our mistakes and explain and to be transparent, that it causes people to do that. What I'll say is this: if you're sharing your wins, if you're sharing my 10K months and look at the car I bought and all this stuff, then it's on the responsibility is also on you to share when you're not doing that, because what that does is create really negative reactions in people to be like, I'm not doing that well. When I did that, I failed. So I
Yep.
think if you're one of the people responsible for making people feel yucky about their business, then you need to remind people that it's not all sunflower and roses on your court. But then to the other point is, if you're not doing that, if you're not like, I'm had a 10K a month, if you're just someone who's just running a business and you have a launch, and I think that it does take credibility away from people to keep saying like, I made this mistake. I think there's beauty in it
Yeah.
and I love that. But I think there's also a little bit of just like, there is no big business who is like Glossier isn't going to be like, we did that and it flopped, right? I think the only example I've ever seen of that is Taco Bell, where they like launched breakfast and it didn't do well. And then they're like, here's Pete Davidson to tell you that we fucked up. But like,
Yeah.
it's rare. So I think that the answer is yes and no, right? Like
The
I think
only example I can think of where I'm like, I think they handled it well. And it was, I think, a PR shit show. Like it just was. Jenny's ice cream years ago had like listeria that kept coming. They had like 2 different listeria incidences in their batches. And like, I love Jenny and I loved her ice cream. And she's selling a $12 pint of ice cream. So it's hot, for this to happen. And she would write these like first person letters about what she was doing and what was happening next. And I liked it. I was like, she just didn't do the like PR thing. And she just said the real deal. And I liked the way she handled that mistake. And
yeah.
I mean, her business never looked back. It just grew and grew and grew from there. So I'm like, I feel like there's a way to do it, but I think you outlined a good distinction. Is it like this I'm apologizing for existing, or is it a place of vulnerability that makes sense for your audience and makes sense that it isn't apologetic necessarily? Is that?
And also like, if it's something that's affecting other people, you got to say it. But if like you had a launch and it flopped, learn from it, find out why, and then make it better the next time. But I think what people do is that they say, oh, this thing flopped, I'm going to take it back and fix it. Now people automatically in their minds are like, that shit flopped for a reason.
That was broken.
And like,
yeah.
Kind of make it better, but you're like, is it better? You're creating hesitation in the minds of your audience. So I think, again, if you're doing a thing that affects other people, or if the mistake you made affects another person, you own that shit. You say it, you say what happened, you address it. If you just have something like, I didn't hit my goals, I didn't do this, I think it's fine to hear that. But remember how everything is about perception, if I'm being honest. Like, and the worst thing that you can do, especially because we're already dealing with so much imposter syndrome, that the worst thing you can do is give people to also feel that about you. So, I think be honest, be transparent. If it affects people, say it. If you're being an asshole and telling everybody how many 6-figure months you're having and then you have a flop thing, then say that. Yeah. But if it's just a mistake and you're growing from it and you want to try it again, just take the learning. You don't have to like voice to every person that it's happening. That's not really, me, in my opinion, is not the approach that I would take.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a great distinction and good response. Okay. Where can everybody hang out with you? Where are you hanging out the most these days? Is it Instagram? And tell us what's coming down the pipeline. I think the brand voice service, I'd love like every human in my world to go through that with you, because I think that would help inform and make their life a lot easier. But tell us what services and kind of how people can work with you.
Yeah, we're definitely on Instagram. It's probably the social media platform that we're on the most. So definitely come hang out with us there at oxfordcomma.co, which is funny because everywhere you can find us is at oxfordcomma.co. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, it's even our website. So it's very easy. We kept that very simple. To your point about brand voice, I will say this, our brand voice service is expensive because we give you a 75 slide document that has everything you'll ever need to write for your brand. So we also just launched Brand Voice for Bad Bitches, which is a 250-page workbook where I and my team put every little piece of knowledge in our brains about building a brand voice, and created a workbook where people can do that for themselves. Because again, I don't believe in gatekeeping. So it is a workbook that you can work through yourself. I teach you every element. I give you assignments to do so that you can understand what you're doing. And there's a lot of teaching, a lot of actual working. And then at the end, you're able to create every single element that we would have created for you if we did your brand voice. So if brand voice is appealing to people, but they're not really ready for, a 4-figure investment, Brand Voice for Bad Bitches is the way to go. And it has everything. It has our signature 4-step, our 4Ds method in there. It has everything that we do to build your brand voice. It's teaching you how to do research, how to research your audience, how to segment your audience, and then how to turn all that information that you found into actual brand elements. So it's a really good resource that I'm obsessed with. It's a labor of love. I've been working on it for almost 2 years, and it's the culmination of a lot of work and a lot of research and a lot of learning and a lot of creating on our end. So if that's something you're interested in, I would highly recommend doing that.
Nice.
And yeah, I love when people reach out to me. I'll send you a voice note or something, but I love it. Just so I love to be transparent. We have a social media manager. Sometimes she's the one responding, not me. But if I say it's me, it's me. It's never someone writing for me, but sometimes you'll get our social media manager. But yeah, check us out on Instagram.
Very last question we ask every guest is share with us one thought that you like to think on purpose. So it could be mantra, an affirmation, a belief, anything that really is a guidepost for you.
Yeah. So I think, and it's funny because someone asked me this, I'm not really like a mantra or like a manifestation girly, but I think one thing that always helps me is, another moment of full transparency is that I also work a full-time job. I'm the copy director at Uber, and I also run a business, and some days are shitty. Some days are really hard, really difficult, really busy. And I think something that always keeps me grounded is reminding myself that it's a bad day, not a bad life, right? Like I think sometimes when it's so easy for us to make things so big and feel like, oh, this is horrible. This is terrible. Oh my God. And it's so hard to see the way out. But I think always reminding myself, it's just a hard day. It's just it's just a rough spot. It's not forever. So I always tell myself it's a hard day, not a hard life.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
If you ask me, everyone should have a coach, especially you. I want to invite you to schedule a free discovery call with me. Go to splendidatl.com/contact. You'll see my calendar there. Book a call with me. You'll learn about my smart growth method where we can grow your business or organization sustainably with ease and massive impact. Think you've reached out to everyone in your network? Are you out of ideas to get noticed and get funded? I hear you. That's why I'm giving you a chance to steal my prospect list. Yes, you can generate leads for your nonprofit or impact-driven business. Grab my mini training and list delivered to your inbox instantly. Go to splendidcourses.com/prospect.